Hi, everybody. I'm Susan Gerbic, and I'd like to welcome you today to our second webinar in this series for Pass the Torch. I'm really excited today. This is a topic that Eric and I have been talking about doing for a while, and it's time to do it. And we have some really great examples of different things for you today. Now, I'm Susan Gerbic. I am the ambassador for Center for Inquiry, and I'm in charge of just kind of pushing things around and making things kind of happen a little bit. And something I've always wanted to do, getting the groups back together and getting everybody excited about being back to in-person events. Now, we know that sometimes, especially right now, some people are a little wary of coming back into in-person events. We have that in mind, and that's what this video that we're going to be doing today, this webinar for you, and all those people out there who are watching this on YouTube later. We are doing this for you to help. So I'd like to introduce Eric, who will introduce himself to you.
Well, thank you, Susan. My name is Eric Shaver, and I'm the outreach coordinator here at the Center for Inquiry and the producer of the Pass the Torch newsletter and skill seminar series. As Susan mentioned, in this webinar, we're going to be discussing some strategies for virtual and hybrid events. We'll just get right into it. So, as we're all well aware of, much of what has made up secular and skeptical activism and the community that has surrounded these projects was forced to go entirely virtual during the COVID-19 pandemic. And given the circumstances, many groups actually found quite a bit of success operating in these spaces. But now that groups are starting to reopen and become comfortable meeting in person again, we've noticed a growth in these sort of hybrid events, these in-person programs with the option to join virtually through Zoom or Facebook Live or other online platforms. Sometimes these take the form of lectures or workshops with the main presentation and a Q&A session. And in other cases, they're more like a discussion group or skeptics in the pub style social meetup. But all of these events, whether they're entirely virtual or hybrid, can be great tools to engage your audience and expand your reach. In many cases, it's quite easy to record these programs and post them on YouTube or your social media accounts afterwards, which is not only convenient for your members to reflect on or to watch later if they couldn't attend live, but it can also help to establish the legitimacy of your organization to newcomers who will be able to see quite quickly upon opening your page that your group is actively creating content and having interesting conversations that they might want to be a part of in the future. So here in the Pass the Torch seminars, we'd like to go over some strategies that you can implement to ensure that you're creating content that's worth broadcasting. You want to treat your virtual audience well, whether they're participating live or watching a stream of the event later. And so tonight, we'd like to show you a variety of examples of ways that this can go wrong, and ultimately to start a conversation with you all about how we as a movement can improve upon the content that we're producing online. Before we get into some examples and our discussion of these topics, I'd like to make a couple of things clear. The first thing is that this will not be exhaustive of every scenario that you might encounter when running this kind of event online, but rather Susan and I would like to share some of what we've learned through experience, both running events and watching others, so that you might not make the same mistakes moving forward. And so in this, we're going to kind of jump around through a bunch of examples that we've collected and talk about what could have been done better in these cases. Throughout the webinar, we invite you to please engage with the chat function and put your suggestions in and help us learn from your experiences as well. Additionally, you might think of problems that you've encountered or might need help with something for an event, and that's why you're here tonight. So in either case, we invite you to ask questions using the Zoom Q&A function, and we'll do our best to answer them at the end. If some of these questions warrant a deeper explanation, perhaps they'll form the basis for one of our upcoming skill seminars in the coming months. But either way, we'd like you to feel comfortable being a part of the conversation tonight using both of the Q&A and chat spaces. And if you're watching this later on YouTube, hello. Please drop your questions in the comment sections and we'll do our best to respond to you there. And the other thing that I like to make clear is that we fully understand that everyone watching is coming into this discussion with varying degrees of technological ability and access to equipment. So while we may touch on some things that hint at a higher skill level in video production or editing, we're going to do our best to keep things simple. And again, if you have deeper questions about anything we speak about tonight, please utilize the Q&A or feel free to reach out via email at outreach@centerforinquiry.org, and we'll try to get back to you with some answers. So how about we get started, Susan? Do you want to bring up the first video?
Yeah, yeah. We have so many exciting clips for you today, and I'm going to mention this right away. I found a lot of these on the internet. I came up with all these ideas of things that might be flawed, flawed videos, and I just chopped them up a little bit. And Eric and I have been emailing them back and forth to each other. A lot of the videos are from my own experience, from our own past years as Monterey County Skeptic Camp. I don't mean any of these videos to hurt anybody's feelings because they're bad examples. Most of them, like I say, they're from my team, and it's my fault that probably these are not so great, but they're good examples of why something went wrong. We're a very small group. We didn't have the technology. A lot of them are from several years ago, but we have all kinds of fun ones. So I hope you guys enjoy some of these. And Eric and I are going to kind of go through them fairly fast because you will be able to go back and look at these again, or you'll be able to engage with us later with some sort of conversation that we're having about these. So the first one I'm going to show you is we calling it Live Mic. And this one is something I took off of the British channel. Okay, here we go. It's only 31 seconds long.
Hello, how are you? No, come and have a talk with me. How are you getting on?
Out on the campaign trail today, the British Prime Minister made a rookie mistake.
But all these Eastern Europeans were coming in.
As Gordon Brown got into his car, he clearly forgot he was still wearing a microphone, and the cameras were still rolling.
That was a disaster. Should never have put me with that woman. Whose idea was that?
Capturing Brown's blunt appraisal of Gillian Duffy, the British voter he had just met.
She's just a sort of bigoted woman.
Oh, I've seen that so many times and I just keep laughing every time I see it because it is a rookie mistake. Come on, Eric. That was, how could that have been fixed?
Yeah, well, I mean, most of what we're going to go over tonight is going to involve setup and preparation. And so, this one really highlights the importance above almost everything else of communication, right? Knowing, when your mics are live, when your cameras are rolling, who's going to be leading discussions and who's in charge of, everything that goes into putting an event together. So, I mean, in this case, this is something that's relatively simple to, it's a relatively simple mistake to make if you're not communicating with everyone who's involved right from the start.
Yeah. And, thinking about it again, listening to this is very possible to happen in our community and in conferences or in talks or in even Zoom events like this, that people don't realize that they're still live. And it's this mistake that can just follow us forever and really just ruin somebody and ruin a organization. So I mean, I highly caution everybody. Well, first off, don't say stuff like that. But second, just be overly aware that you are on camera and that you are being videoed and your mic could possibly be live. Just putting that out there, you guys. You've been forewarned. Okay, so I have another one. This is coming from your Redmond, wonderful example of that. A talk that you did there at your group, right?
Right. Yep. This was at CFI Western New York. We had Tim Redmond, a local educator, come in, and we'll take a look at something that happened while he was up on our stage at CFI headquarters.
And this video, by the way, you guys, is available on Center for Inquiry's YouTube channel. So this is just 18 seconds. Let's see if you all notice what goes wrong.
Example of that is in cheap fakes and deep fakes. So to define these terms as we get started, a cheap fake is a photograph or an audio file or a video file that has been taken out of context or edited using something like Photoshop.
Okay, what do you guys think of that? So Eric gave it to me and said he was talking about this. Can you describe what was going on in this a little bit better?
Right, yeah. So, Tim was up on stage, and before we started the lecture, we had went through our checklists and set up the lighting, and we were checking out the mics and making sure that everything was sounding good for our audience in the building that night. And it really went well. It was one of our better lectures that we've had this year, and we had a great time. And while we were in the room, we could see Tim quite clearly and hear him just fine. But upon reviewing the video, we found that anytime he walked to the left-hand side of the stage, he was completely immersed in shadows. We couldn't see him on the camera. And this, very much like the live mic issue, is just, something that could easily be solved by making sure that you're covering all your bases when setting up before an event, not only to make sure that everyone's mics are working, but that your cameras are set up in the right area and that the lighting is good for your virtual audience. Because, of course, as we mentioned, we want to make sure that we're treating our virtual audience well, to make them feel like they're a part of this event. And every time that Tim walked to the left hand side of the stage, it really was just listening to him talk. You couldn't see him, you didn't get that experience of watching the lecture like you did when you were in the hall. And that was something that we could have easily solved by just moving the camera so that it captured that lighting a little bit, or changing our lights to make sure that the left hand side of the stage was a little bit brighter. Of course, we also could have spoke with Tim in advance to just keep him on the right hand side of the stage, to say this isn't going to work for our current environment. So we would like you to remain over here where the lighting is well. But again, this is all about prep, to make sure that you're prepared for these things by walking through this process before you hit record.
Right. And, these aren't horrible crimes against humanity or anything over here. These are just little things that could probably improve the look, and the feel for the person who's watching this virtually, either over like a Zoom or Facebook Live or YouTube or something like that. And these can be fixed. And you can mention really quick, Eric, how you could fix that in post-production without going into a lot of detail, but
Sure. Yeah. I mean, so in this case, as Tim walked to the left side of the stage, he was really just, he was moving across the stage quite a bit during his presentation. And when he was off on the left side of the stage, we were able to go in and just clip in the slide that he was speaking on. So we got a copy of his PowerPoint. We were able to take screen grabs of each one of his slides, and then just using very simple and free editing software, clip out the video in the portions where he is in shadow and just replace that portion of the video with the slide. So it unfortunately doesn't improve the live experience for the people that were there that night. But now that we're able to post this and share it on our social media and YouTube channel, anybody who is going to watch it at that point won't have to deal with that aspect of it. They will just be able to view the slide, which is also nice to, include that anyway, to be able to give them a chance to look at it up close rather than just on the screen.
Really, really great. And like I said, we're not going to go into detail about editing tips and stuff like that. And you out there listening may not have great skills editing, but possibly somebody within your community does. And other people can help. And possibly we'll do another webinar on this as well. Another thing I just want to quickly mention is that he's passing in front of that light. As he does, things are written across his face. I remember doing a talk somewhere, and I had a slide up there, and I'm the type that stands in front of the screen also. And the word skeptic was right across my forehead, and somebody snapped a photo of it, and it was great. But, it could have been a really embarrassing word or something that could have been up there at that moment. So, kind of just keep it in mind. Now, this one I'm going to show you next is very similar. It's also dealing with light. When I pull these darn things up, the audio starts all the way. Boy, I sound really like I'm not prepared. Let me show you this. This is also lighting. This is me. Now, I want to mention that it is one of the events we did, and I had started out the video, and as I was doing my video, people were saying, I can't see the screen. It's too bright. So people started turning out the lights, and I said, okay, I'll just go with that. So we didn't practice this ahead of time, but here you can see. Somebody had posted on Andy, this is my dear brother, my twin brother died of pancreatic cancer. Andy is so sad. He apparently quit smoking in 2013. I didn't know that. My pizza rollers didn't even know that. Okay, that's all that needs to be shown, but you can see that it's just awful as far as my, it's awful as far as the video. I mean, that's just embarrassing. What was I even thinking? I was thinking in the moment, somebody's turning out the lights and I have X amount of time to finish my thing and I didn't have time to deal with it. I was the organizer for the event. I'm speaking at the event. Mistake number one.
Yeah, I mean, having a team available to, go through this checklist and to, to delegate tasks to, like, making sure the audio is good, to make sure that your video is working with a screen. I mean, it's the kind of thing where for all the people in the room, they might have been able to see just fine with the lights out. But if you're trying to create content that's going to be broadcast online, you really need to take that extra step to ensure that your virtual audience is be able to participate and to feel like they're getting the full experience of being in that room with you guys.
Absolutely. That was just really embarrassing. But I'm happy to have done that years ago, just so that I have this moment with you, Eric, and all of you guys out there watching to share in my embarrassment. And so nobody's I make many mistakes myself. Okay, this one's interesting because I saw this was the Alex Murdaugh trial in North Carolina that just happened. I was watching a lot of this. And the interesting thing about it is what I'm going to show you is very interesting. But even beyond that is that these people, this is a professional organization that set this up. These are the lawyers that were on the jury, that prosecuted. And they set it up this way. And then the next time I watched the next video, which was an update, it was in the same location with the same issues. And you would think, this place, they probably got, thousands of views, that you would have thought after they did the first video with all the mistakes, they would have changed things, but they didn't. They kept it this way all the time. So let's let you guys see what happens here.
That snot or whatever you want to call it that's coming down his face.
I'll tell you something, Creighton made a note of this, but something I noticed is that when you look at the timeline, he was there 2 minutes before the presumptive murders.
So how many people noticed how many people were standing outside there? That was just like so distracting, having those women right there and the fire truck and the motorcyclist. And all right, Eric, what do you think?
Well, really, I mean, I think it goes right in line with what we were suggesting at the start, from, really taking full stock of the scenario before you hit record to understand what your environment is going to be like and what the experience is going to be like for people that are watching this online. I mean, whenever you're recording, whether it's Zoom or, you're selecting a venue for a lecture or some kind of discussion group, some type of event that you're going to be doing virtually, it's really important to consider what the environment's going to be like, even if it's your own room. I mean, we're both kind of working out of our offices right now, and we have things set up, pretty static backgrounds, things that people might take a look at and acknowledge, but then kind of come back to the programming and being able to pay attention to what it is that you're saying. But I mean, if I had turned my camera towards this window and I had lots of things happening outside CFI in the patio here, and people are moving around, or there's animals out there, cars driving by, I mean, it'd be a little bit more difficult to pay attention to what I'm saying and to take me seriously if something, not as flattering as this current background is happening, right? We've all seen videos on the internet of silly things happening in the backgrounds of people's really important conversations. And you just want to, prepare for those things in advance. You don't want to leave yourself open to that kind of exposure. And so whether it's your own room that you really can control, or it's in the process of selecting a space for your event, that is something you should take into consideration. What is the experience going to be like outside of the area that you're actually hosting? And if there are ways that you can control that, or to temper some of what could go wrong, you should look into that. You should keep that in mind while you're planning your event.
Right. So sometimes the location you think you've got picked out may not be the location you should be having this at. Who knows? I mean, I'm thinking of different times where we've had lectures at places like restaurants and things. And what's going on in the background in North Carolina, I did one for the Triangle Skeptics, And during my talk, which was fine, everything was great, except that towards the end of my talk, they started doing trivia night over the intercom at the restaurant. And that was broadcast even in the room that we were in. And there was nothing we could do about it because I'm trying to compete with this trivia game that's going on. It was quite funny, but that's
Yeah,
what
and I mean, that's a great example of, planning ahead with your venue. But even, in some scenarios, uh, we won't be able to control the sound, and perhaps that was a bad area to have chosen. But there are still ways to get around some of the visual distractions. I mean, you can put up a backdrop, you can
Mhm.
acquire something like that relatively cheap, and there's also virtual options for that. I mean, especially in this kind of context where you're in a Zoom call with people, you can very easily use Zoom to set up a background. We'll have some examples of that later on in the talk
Mhm.
here. But there are ways to avoid this that don't that aren't incredibly complicated. You just have to be aware that this is an issue.
So this next example is going back to, I think, 2015. And this is Mark Edward, my partner, who's going to be giving a little talk. And this is a very crowded space. And we have the camera set up in the back. And behind the camera is the road. So cars going by or whatever's happening out there. So this example is more about what setting up the camera in the right spot, that kind of thing. And the interesting thing, there's a lot of things in this to kind of pay attention to. Keep in mind, you all, we're going to be doing Skepticamp webinars in the future because we really want to see a lot of you guys doing Skepticamps. And this is a Skepticamp in Monterey. You can see all those people there and how everybody's having a really good time. And special points to anybody who can find me in the audience there, because I am right there in the audience. You may not even recognize me. I think it was in 2014.
My whole thing was become the world's greatest psychic, and then after that it's like, what now, It's like, when you find out, when you get to the top, you gotta find another mountain to climb. All right. So, now we have Kathy McKenzie. Kathy's been a friend for a while. She's a great writer. She writes she's been a journalist for 30 years. She writes about gardening and sustainable living for the Monterey Herald and other publications. What does that sound?
Yoga class.
Oh, okay.
So you may or may not be able to hear that sound really well, but it was pretty clear because we are in the audience. The camera is in the audience and we have a nice visual going down. Behind that screen is a bathroom. So that could be quite awkward if seeing people coming and go through there. It was a very bad location, but we got it for a very inexpensive price. So, what do you think, Eric?
Well, I mean, I see a couple of red flags that you had mentioned there. I mean, for one, having the camera in the audience and having that be the source of your audio is really a difficult scenario to overcome. I mean, if you have your speaker needing to project over a crowd of people who may be making noise, who may be coughing, who may be reacting to what they're saying, it's going to be difficult for them to really come through to the virtual audience in a way that's effective. And also, it appears that there's something behind the camera that's also making noise. You mentioned there might have been something like a
I
coffee
think the
machine,
coffee
or
pot.
yeah, it was sort of hissing or humming back there. And there are a few ways to overcome this. Of course, moving the camera closer to the speaker allows them to be more at the forefront of what's being picked up by the microphone, and it also eliminates some of the backs of the head phenomenon that you're seeing for most of the crowd. That has the downside of then not being able to really show that you're in an audience, that there is an event happening there. But I think the pros there of getting the higher quality video and audio of the speaker kind of outweigh that. Also, it's not an option for everyone necessarily, but you could look into getting some additional audio equipment, having a lapel mic or even just a microphone hooked up to whatever computer you're streaming through, and have that be the only source of audio that is going into the webinar, so that you're not picking up anything from the camera. The camera is just focused on capturing the video content, and then the microphone is handling all of the audio directly from the speaker. And then, of course, if you do want to engage with the audience, you'd be able to hand around that microphone and get their input as well.
Right, very good. If he had a microphone on, I think it would have been a much better experience. And keep in mind, the people in the room are having a fine experience. They can hear everything's great, but it's more when you create the video later, because of course, this is before we were using Zoom all the time, doing anything live. We could have, there's a lot of things that we could have done, and hopefully we'll do those kinds of things in the future. I also want to mention that video camera is sitting up on a tripod in the back. And that means that, and it's collecting the audio. That means anybody sitting near that camera, not only could they knock it, but anything that they're saying to each other, even if they're being very quiet, this is like the hot mic thing, is going to be captured on there. Or if you have somebody who's coughing a lot, or they're opening up candy wrappers or something like that, or they're doing something that's loud, it's all recorded on that audio, and you're competing. And it's going to be very difficult for later for somebody to be able to go back and extract that audio and fix it. I mean, it's more work than we should have to do. We should just do it right. But the conversations happening with people near that camera are all going to be picked up, and I don't think they're aware of it.
Yeah, and I mean, you obviously can't control all the variables of a crowd, especially if you're inviting public people in. But I see Jack here in the Q&A had mentioned that, it's important to remind non-organizers that they too will be on camera and mic, to at least make everybody in the room aware that this is being recorded, and that, so things that they say could be picked up by that. At least you're covering your bases by mentioning that to your crowd.
Right. And some people, of course, smaller groups may not have the equipment, but possibly you might be able to borrow it from another group, or you may be able to find somebody within your community, your own group that has this kind of equipment. Oh, there's a lot of people who volunteer to ask if they can help out. They just need to be said, yeah, I really could use some help. Do you know how to use audiovisual equipment? Or do you know how to do post-production of video? And they're more than happy to help. They just need to be asked. So, make sure you survey who's in your group and what are their special talents, and see what maybe you can get from them, because a group grows better when everybody's being able to participate, not only participate, but help. And you don't want to have the organizer burning out. We don't need to be doing everything. That's for sure. Okay,
Absolutely.
so I've got another one for you.
Let's see it.
All right, so this one's kind of interesting. It's a Murdoch trial, because I was watching it, and there were so many bad examples in these things. Sorry, people. And besides, So this is a young man who is a juror on the trial, and he's being interviewed by some reporters. Now, this is uber close, and it really bugs me that it's like a headshot of this poor man. He also talks about his tie, and he's talking about the tie later in the interview, and you can't see the tie. So, but here, tell me what you think.
That, we had already had the decision, but we knew that we were right there at it.
So the whole 2 hours and 50 minutes, what went on, like in the beginning, like just going through the instructions, or?
Well, we had a pretty good idea of what the instructions were, just because the judge read that it was there, he was there, and I think that we all, had enough evidence there that whenever we went and deliberate, there was enough there whether he got on the stand or not.
Without the kennel video, do you think there was enough there?
I'm not sure, because there was the kennel video.
Okay, so what did you think of that?
Well, it's kind of hard to follow what it is he was talking about there. I mean, I understand this clip was taken out of context, but it appears, especially towards the end there, that he was responding to a question from the interviewers there, the audience, and in our case, if we're going to extrapolate to our situations, and we just don't know what he's responding to. And so,
How can this be fixed?
Well, there's a few things you can do there. I mean, for one, if you're going to have a Q&A session, if you're going to be engaging directly with a speaker in that way, you want to perhaps have the audience engage directly into a microphone. We kind of just hinted at that. You'd be able to get them to talk to the camera, but that's, not necessarily what you need to do in every scenario. One thing you can do to cover your bases here is to have the speaker reiterate the question, right? To announce what they're going to be talking about after they receive that question.
And that's just communicating with your speaker. A lot of professional speakers or, who do a lot of this, they know to repeat the question, because your audience is not just the people in front of you. The audience is the people who are watching virtually and sometimes later. Now, a video that was created that was uploaded to YouTube later, there's two different ways they can fix this, right? They can fix the audio levels, or they could type in the questions onto the video. And so it would appear written what you can't hear. So of course these can be fixed, but it takes a little more effort. But if you're trying to, one of the things you've said many times, and this really has stuck with me here in this video, I mean, our webinar we're doing right now, is you want to treat your virtual audiences well, those people who are watching, hi again, and create a content that is worth watching later. And that really isn't engaging, because we don't know what's going on, but anyway.
Right.
Okay.
You made a good point there too, that not only is it, part of this process is what we've been, saying over and over again here, that you want to prepare for these things in advance and communicate with your speaker to ensure that they're aware of these things, but also that there are ways to kind of fix these mistakes afterwards. And they are, in many cases, pretty simple editing techniques, right? If you found yourself in the unfortunate situation of, having an interview like that, having that content in your possession, you want to fix it, some editing software, adding some text into the bottom to show what kind of question they're responding to is pretty easy to.
That would have been simple.
And it
Very
improves your
simple to do.
content a lot.
Absolutely. And somebody else in the team may be able to do that. It's not really hard, but so this next clip I'm going to show you, and I'm going to apologize to Mark Edward again, because I used him as an example, but just to set it up a little bit so he doesn't get mad at me. This is another one of our skeptic cams, and he was filling in for a moment while somebody else was doing something else, some kind of technological problem or something. So he's the showman. He'll get up there and he'll talk, no problem. And so he doesn't even put the lapel mic on. He's just holding it, which is really awkward. But, we were trying to do something really quick, and I didn't have time to communicate with him about some, like, where to stand and so on. Several things happen in this video. So let's see how much everybody catches of this.
What they said, and there's really no proof. So to me, the real proof of a phenomenon is actually being able to make it occur in real time. Like that. See, I did that with my mind.
Always able to take advantage of an opportunity. That's my mark. So what'd you see?
Well, the first thing there is that you had the camera tracking back and forth to try to follow him in the room. I mean, we know that a lot of speakers and a lot of good speakers are, kind of active talkers. They move around a lot. They're going to be utilizing the space that's available to them, and that's fine. But perhaps situating the camera back a little bit, or at a slightly wider angle with your lens to capture more of that space, so you don't have to follow the speaker around the entire time, is one thing that you could have done in advance to kind of allow him to utilize that space without compromising the content. A second thing that you can do that is perhaps a little bit more advanced, but I want to mention it because I think it's a useful tactic, would be to have two different cameras set up. If you have one camera set up a little bit farther back with a wide angle, and then one that's zoomed in on a lectern, or the area that you're expecting the speaker to be most of the time, you can have two different recordings, or use something like a switcher to cut back and forth between the two. And you can edit this together quite easily at the end to have one cohesive video where the audio doesn't break, but you are using two different camera angles to kind of create a story there, to show that there's a larger space that they're using, but to be able to zoom in on them when it's important. And this also allows you to capture PowerPoint slides when it's necessary to show the entire stage and what they're talking about on a screen. But then when they're getting into the details and talking directly to the audience, you can zoom in on them, and you don't have to jiggle the camera around and shake things, which also caused what I think is the second glaring issue in that video, which is the camera's autofocus. It kept trying to grab onto him as he was moving, and so there's a lot of really kind of unwatchable moments in that where it's really difficult to continue to follow them, because when you're watching a lecture, you're seeing a person, and you're trying to, virtually, you're trying to feel like you're a part of the conversation, like that person's speaking directly to you. And if they're continually going out of focus and there's a lot of movement with the camera, it's really hard to situate yourself as a viewer. And so those are a couple things that you can do to prevent these. But worst case scenario, if you don't have the options and your camera has to be close like that, it might be better just to try to capture as much audio as you can and leave the camera where it is. If he walks off to the side a little bit, it's frustrating, but I think that's it's better to get the audio and a clear shot for as much as you can, rather than disrupting by moving around a lot like that.
Right, because you can always put the slides in if he had slides. You can add those in later to cover up, so you have your audio line and then you have the slides. So there's still, you can hear them and you can see the slides, and that's a nice way of getting out of the situation. Not
Absolutely.
so great if you don't have somebody with slides. The other thing is again communicating to the speaker, and it wasn't Mark's fault because he was just filling in really quickly. But you communicate with them. You can almost say, or put blue tape down. Here are your limits. Don't walk past this line on this side and this line on this side, because anything outside of that is not going to be a good video.
Right.
Let them know in advance, and again, communicate, be prepared, and so on. Now this one, oh, I'm okay.
And I have no.
So this is also a skeptic camp. Nice talk somebody had given to us on the moon or something like that. And it was probably that same event where I was at, where the slides with the slides were so bright. But for whatever reason, we decided we were going to turn the lights down, but we turned the lights down so
I don't know what Dude Perfect, Dan, TDM, but apparently they make that amount of money on YouTube.
So it's the audio is sounds awful, for one thing, and there's no person there. It's just
so I mean, it's kind of the opposite scenario that we've been discussing here, but a similar fix. It's really just that you are capturing content, you are situated a certain way in your venue, and you're able, in this case, to see the slides, but you're not able to engage with the speaker. And so, ensuring that they're situated in the correct spot to be captured by the camera, and that they're not leaving that area, or rather focusing the camera on them, and then in post-production adding slides, or we've spoken a few different ways that you can try to capture both of those things. I think that's just, it's also preparing in advance to make sure that you're ready for the type of content that you're trying to create. And I think looking at what what we saw in that little clip there, I mean, it's not the sort of thing that I'm going to sit down and watch a lot of, right? There's a lot of extra noise going on, and it's just a PowerPoint. I mean, we don't need the video element of that. And in that case, I mean, you might want to just capture the audio and share bits of that. But it can actually deter people from participating and watching if they open it up and they see something like that. It's not going to catch people's attention.
right. It's not quality content that's going to make people want to engage with your channel or your group. It doesn't represent you well. The other thing that was on there, I don't know if you guys caught, I'm running the camera. Again, I'm trying to do everything. Don't do that, people. Have people help you. Ask somebody to help you. I'm laughing. He said something, I laugh. I'm right next to the camera, so you can hear me laughing. And if I had said something to somebody else or anything like that, it's all on the camera. And it all on the audio. And so those are all rookie mistakes that we really shouldn't be doing if we're trying to capture really good content. Okay, I've got like 2 more in this series, and then we're going to go to the Zoom. So here's this next one. This is a video. This one is so interesting. I watched the whole thing. It is a viral video that I don't even remember. And this is one of the points I make in the webinar we did previously. You guys should watch that too, because it's part of this series that Eric and I are running, is on marketing your group and so on. And I did a whole segment in there about making sure that you take advantage of all the visual opportunities possible. Because as you're looking at this clip, you're thinking, oh, what a wonderful lecture this guy is giving from the Doubletree Hotel. Is it for the Doubletree organization? The lectern is totally being, you're losing the opportunity of advertising your organization on the lectern. Now, let me show you this. And
is the boonies. Webster defines the boonies as a location so far outside of the city limits, even animals question your presence. And I've lived there most of my life. Louisiana, Mississippi, Oklahoma, Texas, Arkansas, it did not matter.
Okay, so what do you think, Eric?
Well, I mean, it's somewhat comical, right? I mean, there's this really dramatic zoom in on him as he's speaking, and I mean, you can tell here that he's saying something that it had caused a reaction from the crowd, but we have no idea what that is. We
He's
can't
pointing
see
to
a
the
slide
slide,
up there,
but
right?
we don't see the slide.
So it's another example of just not, of setting yourself up for success, knowing what you're trying to capture in your content from the start. And in this case, situate the camera at such an angle that you can have a wide angle view of the entire stage, capture the speaker and the slides. And if that's not possible, right, you have the options to try to edit the slides in afterwards. But if you're going to be showing this to people, it really detracts from the experience of the virtual viewers if they're not able to see what the speaker's talking about.
Look at this stage. You can see the stairs walking up and down and this and all. I mean, why would anybody want to show that?
And you could see, actually, it seemed like the person doing the filming there perhaps recognized that as they were recording, and they start zooming in thinking, okay, like, this is my speaker, I want to show them. Well, perhaps that's just how the video should have started, right? Just capture your speaker and not all of that extra stuff. It's going to allow you to have a bit more of a professional viewing video. You really don't want to have a slow panning zoom in just on a lecture like this. It doesn't need to be done. And
right. And this video's got over 1 million views. It went viral. And you don't always know when you're going to go viral. So you don't always get a second chance, right? Because you've already created the video. It's out there. And you go to sleep and you wake up in the morning and something happened. It is really funny, actually. If you were to get a chance. Okay, so this one, I wasn't even sure if I was going to put it in here or not, but let's do this. I'm setting up another skeptic camp. I'm telling you guys, we've done a bunch of these. They're so much fun. We skipped this year. We did workshops instead. This is Leonard Chamel. He is a fellow at CFI and a good friend of ours. And you can see I'm finally, I'm getting my lectern here. It took a while before I started getting all these posters, but this is over here on the side. It's a big, nice poster for Monterey County skeptics. It's not in the frame, but let's look at this.
Get the book, pick it up on the way home. There are these things, bookstores, you may have heard of them. Download it tonight, but really read the book. It's great. Daniel Kahneman, Thinking Fast and Slow. The basic idea is that we have two classes of cognitive systems in our brain. System 1 and System 2, brilliantly made.
Okay, so that's all I really need to show you. So what do you think of that, Eric?
Well, there's a few things there. I mean, I think camera position, again, is key in this scenario. I mean, in this case, our speaker is sitting down and you're kind of looking down on them from this tripod, I'm assuming, or the camera's up on something. You're catching a lot of your crowd, the back of the crowd's heads, and that is kind of taking up the forefront of your view here. It's like that is kind of the subject of what you're looking at. You have to look over that to see the speaker and to look at the slides. So the first thing I see is camera angle. Is there anything else that comes to your mind?
Well, it's just if we had communicated, I mean, Leonard told me right before we went on, he wanted to sit down during his presentation, which is totally fine, but we didn't have the camera ready for him. So, if we had known in advance, we would have maybe done it differently and positioned it differently. What I don't show you in that video is that right after that clip, people start standing up and they're walking off and they're like right in front of the camera, and it's very distracting. And again, we should have had that camera set up in a different location so we'd be able to record it better. And if I'm going to have the camera in that angle, I should have, as Monterey County Skeptics, I should, or whatever organization I'm representing, have the video, have the images of the logo and stuff more in the view of the camera. So instead of having it on that side of the screen, we should have moved all the visual to the other side of the screen, because you never know when it'll go viral.
Right. And this also brings to mind, you mentioned that Leonard had told you then that he wanted to sit down. He felt more comfortable in this scenario sitting for his presentation. And that's something you should absolutely keep on your checklists when you're preparing for these types of events, is to communicate with the speaker or, the panelists, the people that are going to be the subject of your video, to, ensure that they're comfortable in the scenario that you're setting up for them, and to make sure that you can adapt to that in advance. I mean, here at CFI Western New York, or at CFI headquarters events, we have a stage that has multiple stairs, and we always ask our speakers ahead of time, about their our ADA compliance, to make sure that we can accommodate them if they're not able to get up the stairs, and we might need to set up something else for them to do their presentation. And so, no matter where you are, especially if you're in a venue that you're, perhaps less familiar with, you should scope that out and make sure that you're able to accommodate your speaker's needs.
Absolutely. We're going to transition to a little bit different conversation here in a moment, you guys who are watching. So make sure that you're getting your comments or your questions into the Q&A here at the bottom, or if you're watching this virtually over YouTube or in a video format, please put your comments underneath the video, or you can email Eric at outreach@centerforinquiry.org. So I just want to remind you a couple things before we get on to the virtual event, because there's a couple things that I think fit in here really well. I remember Rob Palmer, the well-known skeptic. He would have audio in his presentations. He's done 3 talks at SciCon and the Sunday papers. And when he would have audio to play, the first time he tried it, he's getting to his talk and he's doing his talk, and all of a sudden here comes the audio part and it doesn't work. And it was very frustrating, kind of threw him off his game a little bit. So the next time he does a talk, he puts a little tiny audio clip at the very, very, very beginning, just something very brief. And then that's played. And that way he knows if the audio is going to work, because it's, it's turned on or whatever. And if it hadn't, he would have been able to fix it before he gets into his gear. So having something like that allows you to test the technology beforehand. I mean, they should have just tested that better before. I think they did, but I think something got turned off or something, but it's kind of awkward,
Yeah, as hosts, you should definitely make sure that your on your end, all of your technology is up and running before. And you also, one thing you could do is try to get a hold of the speaker in advance and get a copy of their presentation and run through it. I know when we're running events here at headquarters, I will always set up one of our presentation laptops and play some music through the speakers and adjust the sound so that I can see what real extreme sounds are going to sound like, in case speaker is talking too closely to their microphone, or they drop the mic, or something like that happens. It's not going to be completely out of control. And so these are easy steps you can take. They should be in your checklist to make sure that you don't leave your speaker in an awkward situation where all this time they put in to prepare for this presentation gets derailed by you not being prepared as the host.
Right. So the organization, whoever's running the slides, should be in charge of this, have the slides, make sure that the presenter up there in the lectern knows how to use whatever the little clicky thing is, right and left, make sure there's batteries in it, that kind of thing. You don't want to embarrass your speaker. You don't want to make the audience feel awkward. I had given a talk to the European skeptics in 2014, I believe, and I'm over there in Poland. Wonderful place, you guys. And I had given him my slides way in advance because I was on tour, and I'd given him my slides and I rehearsed them and so on. And then as I got really close to the date, I went through and I changed all the slides, because I said, oh, well, this is better this way. And I take these out, add these in. So I gave the slides to them right before I went on, thinking no problem. I just handed it to him. It shouldn't be a problem. I got up to, they introduce me. I walk up, I'm all mic'd up and I'm talking to the audience, and I start off with something kind of emotional. And then I start my slides. And as I've already gotten like a slide in, and then the second slide, I realize this is the wrong presentation. It's the one I practiced ages ago, but I don't remember it now. And everything I prepared, even the little notes I'd made for myself, they're not matching the slides. So I have no idea what the next slide is going to be coming up. I have no clue. So it's a mistake that, of course, they made a mistake. I made a mistake. We should have all checked that out ahead of time. If you have, and I should mention this, if you have a speaker who is comfortable being on stage and is a little more smooth with these kinds of things, if you're the organizer, allow the speaker to kind of deal with it, because a lot of the speakers are comfortable handling critical, not critical, what do I want to say, like stressful situations, and they can make light of it. I just made light of it and said, hey, these aren't the right slides. We're going to all be surprised to know what the next slide is that comes up, aren't we? And it was a great talk. It was a great talk. People were, it was great. They said it was fantastic. I even had some people in tears. It was great. Maybe not because of my presentation, but it was fine. Nothing horrible is going to happen. So even though Eric and I are giving you these really awful scenarios, you can't think of everything, right? Anything else you want to add before we get over to the moderators?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And I mean, that dovetails quite well with what you were suggesting there, is that part of the preparation really in having, someone specifically assigned, someone who's had the task delegated to them to oversee, the recording of an event, the moderation of the chat, the setup for things like this. The moderator can set up a practice session. This is something that we did for the Zoom call. This is something that we do for our lectures here at CFI Western New York. If we can get the speaker and the host together, even just 15 minutes before the presentation starts, to kind of go over, make sure the mics are working, make sure that you can share your screen if it's a virtual event, all of these sorts of things. And not only that you can share the screen, but that the audio is working and that everyone can hear. You make those minute adjustments, even just 15 minutes before, can really help improve your content. And this is the sort of thing that if you were able to do that before that lecture, you might have realized, oh, hey, this is the wrong presentation. We need to make this change. And then you could have swapped out a USB drive or just a file, and you could have caught that right at the beginning.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're going to switch over to more of a discussion on the virtual aspects of this. And this conversation came up because, as I said, a lot of people are starting to get back in person, and then there's a lot of people who are not, and they're still not comfortable being out in public. During the pandemic, as bad as it and horrible it was at a lot of times, one of the things that did allow us to do is a lot of groups worldwide were doing a lot of content over the internet, and they were able to use Zoom. And now we have people from all over the world who were able to watch events happening. So, people from Australia were watching in on things happening in America. America was watching what was happening in New Zealand. New Zealand's watching, so there's a lot of crossover. And I think it helped a lot of the groups. I know I was able to have a lot of great conversations with people I wouldn't normally have been able to have. We were able to get speakers from outside the country who we wouldn't have been able to afford to fly in to be able to do talks. But we're still not like, so we're not, even when the pandemic is completely over, we're still going to probably be doing a lot of virtual talks, because it just seems like it works well if it's done right. And I put out to my friends on Facebook, I said, what do you guys think of virtual talks and so on? And one of my friends, Gail, she had a lot to say. And one of the things she said is that she started watching a organization that she was a member of during the pandemic when they were doing videos. Now, remember, we're all trying to find our way. And so there's a lot of mistakes that are made. But she said that she felt totally like a third-class citizen or second-class citizen. Her and all of her friends stopped watching the feed because they never addressed the person on the video who was watching this, or the people who were watching virtually. They didn't have a committed moderator. And you need a moderator who's watching not only the Zoom chat, what's happening on the Zoom, but if it's being broadcast on Facebook or YouTube, you need somebody watching over there for those comments as well. And so she says nobody ever addressed them. You know, it was like they were just watching, and it didn't feel like they were part of the community. Plus, you know, the group would start laughing about something and it's off screen. Nobody knows what's going on. Nobody's, if they have a question, there's nothing designed on how to get the attention of the moderator or anything. It was very awkward. And she says that she knows she left and several of her other friends left. And we don't want to have that happen within the skeptic community. Eric, you and I talked about how best to chat too. That's another thing we didn't even mention.
I'm sorry, could you repeat that?
Well, you know, before you have a panel or before you have a Zoom event, how do you let somebody know? You should have practiced something. How do I let you know, Eric, something privately? You need to have some kind of discussion about that.
All right. Well, I mean, it's embedded right into the Zoom interface that you can open up the chat and you can select different, audiences that you're projecting a chat to. So I can open up the chat now and send a message out to everyone and say hello, and you can see that pop up, and everyone is going to be able to engage with that. But I can click the bubble that indicates who I'm sending that to, and I can select to only communicate with the hosts and panelists if we have a team of people who are talking, or I can click directly on one of those panelists. I could click your name, Susan, and send something to you so that we could communicate directly. Now, there are some pros and cons to this. Obviously, you have to be able to, kind of work on your feet here and be able to open up the chat and have multiple things up on your screen. I mean, it's easier to do if you have multiple screens, but not everybody's going to have access to that. And so there's some other ways that you can tackle this. You could have, your phone open with a Facebook Messenger chat, or even just text messages, some way that you can communicate outside of the platform that you're using. And this also eliminates any accidental messages. If I didn't switch it to Susan and I sent something that was meant to be private between us to all of the panelists or to the entire webinar, we could see how that could be problematic in a similar way to
like a hot
our first
mic
example with the live mic. Yeah. So there's definitely something that if you've prepared for that in advance and you've communicated with everybody who's involved with running the event, your moderator, all of the speakers and panelists, as long as you're all on the same page on how you're going to be communicating, you can really do it however you'd like. But there should be something set up in advance so that everybody has access to that if need be.
Right, absolutely. Just communicate beforehand, set up whatever system you want, so everybody who's on the panel, everybody who's there is on there and knows what's going to happen. Little tip, people out there, if you're playing with Zoom, if you're out there chatting amongst yourselves, you're talking to your friend, whoever organizes the event, whoever owns the video, who's creating this, which would be Eric, just letting you know that they get the chat. So everything in chat is seeable. So even if you're sending it from one person to another, everything said on chat can be seen by the person who's organizing the event. So just, I know we're 3 years into using Zoom and I'm just now telling you that, but that's one of those little things that you should do. If you're talking about the organizer and how much they drive you nuts or whatever of the sorts, please, just assume it's going to be seen by the organizer. Okay, now I've got something that just is kind of fun. This, I'm sorry, I got to show you guys. This went viral, and this is the last of the videos I think I'm going to show you all. So check this out. This is a virtual thing. Everybody's working from home. Oh yeah, it froze on his face. That's lovely. And look at the background. Okay, that's a little cluttered. It's a bit. But what is going to happen here? And I'll show you just briefly what's going to happen. Let's see.
Slow-moving system comes right across the state of Michigan, and that system could bring us about an inch of rain through the mid part of the week, tapering off here late in the day on Thursday. And Thursday could be a pretty windy day, and Thursday also the coolest day that we will see here this coming week. So bottom line, not a bad day coming up for you tomorrow. It will be mild. Temperatures are going to be up in the mid-60s to around 70 tomorrow afternoon. Warm day. Temperatures cool then on Wednesday as some colder air comes on in. And that will be the case here during the day on Thursday as well. Emily's in with the long-range outlook. Looks like the best day of the week.
Okay, I let that go a few seconds longer because I just absolutely love this video. Nobody's paying attention. Does anybody know what state is that? What state was that? Does anybody know? Put it in the chat, please. I don't think anybody's paying any attention to the weather.
Not a clue.
No, not a clue. So Eric, how can we avoid things like that?
Well, I mean, there's a couple things that are going wrong there. I mean, obviously, you didn't prepare the room very well. I mean, you can't control what the cats are doing in the room. I mean, that's just
that could have been really embarrassing too.
But it certainly could have been worse. And I also, upon rewatching this here with you now, I noticed that he had television on in the background that seemed to be playing the live stream of him on the news. So, I mean, that was also, I mean, even without the cats, I would have identified that as a problem there. I mean, shut the TV off or put a solid screen on there. You don't need some kind of Inception thing going. We're seeing layers upon layers of the same video. I mean, it's just, it's bad practice to have a distracting background like that. We talked earlier about, having just something static, something that people might, you can have some character. You can have a little bit about yourself in the background. That's fine. But you don't want things moving around and detracting from what it is you're trying to say, what you're trying to communicate to your audience. And I think, Jack had mentioned it in the Q&A here, that with Zoom, at least, you can use a filter to blur the background. So even if you don't want to create some kind of, background, you can just blur whatever's back there. It has, some AI technology to identify you and not blur your body or your face, but then keep everything else just a nice clean blur so that as you move around, you don't have to worry about your background. But with that being said, you can utilize that to your advantage. And I think we might have an example here of, using a logo in the background. You could put up your logo or your organization's logo to showcase what the event is or what you're talking about. Do you want to share that one with them, Susan?
I don't have any. But I will find it while I'm showing you this next slide. Okay, absolutely. So during the pandemic, again, one of these things, and if you're watching this, 15, 20 years from now, this video, well, hello, future. But during the pandemic, a lot of things changed, right? And one of the things that came out was this Twitter site called Room Rater, I believe is what it was called, Rater, like rating. And it was just a couple that decided they would go every time somebody was on the internet, anybody was on like doing a live feed from their home, because that's what a lot of newscasters and talking heads on TV did. They would go in and they would look at the visual background, and then they would take a screenshot of it and they'd rate the background, and it was hilarious. But let me tell you, it really improved the quality of what you're looking at. And just like Eric said, it's fine to have objects in the background to give you personality and show what kind of human being you are. And we like looking into people's homes and looking at people's offices. It's kind of fun. But things in the background shouldn't be moving. Shouldn't be like, there shouldn't be somebody walking off to the side or something distracting going on. As long as it's static, it should be all right. So I'm going to show you a couple of these here really quick. These are some bad examples that I collected from the internet. And this one right here, and you can see now, okay, keep in mind that these screenshots I've taken aren't necessarily their fault. These people may have been staying in a hotel room, or sometimes they're told to get on the air right now and they have to jump in wherever their friend is at, or they just get to a place where there's a camera and a good a feed or something like that. But you can see it's just very bland. It's just so, if you represent it, okay, if you're representing a group, or if you are the speaker, then you have opportunities to how do I say this, to promote your event a little bit. Here's the next one. So now some of these are a little blown out of, and as far as the visual, the colors and stuff, because I just made screen captures. So some of them are a little bit of a problem with the background. It's kind of bare, but it's, look at this big light right here, and so on. It's not really attractive of him. This guy right here is Michael Schmidt. He's a great writer. He's a great investigator. And I think he's doing something to troll us because he insists on putting the worst backgrounds in his as possible. Now, I'm not a big, huge New York Times writer or something like that. I can't troll people like that. You know, what you put in the background is going to be reflective of you. And here's the room rater. They gave him a 3.10. I mean, the bookcases with no books on it. And everybody's focused on not what he's saying. They're focused on the image behind him. And that's what we're talking about. Either put something that is attractive to look at, that reflects well on you and your organization, or don't put a bookcase in there that's empty. And it's not that he just moved in here, because this was here for weeks and weeks and weeks. There's another empty one. This is just the way it's screenshot. You know, he isn't really in a disco. There's another person again with just an empty background. This right here, the lighting is just so awful. Now, this is Katie Porter. I've seen her do some really great videos where she's in a room. So this must be a hotel room and she's just improvising. But the thing is, yes, these are bad examples I've taken off the internet, but what we're seeing is even within our own organization, people who thought about it, who have had the time to come up with some good backgrounds or good lighting, who are introducing people, you know, the organizers of our events, or who are speakers at our events, they're not putting any time and thought into it. Whereas these people probably just had a rush. Oh my gosh. I forgot about this guy. Eric?
I don't know what to make of this. There's a lot going on there. I mean, it's obviously a mess, right? There are tons of papers all over the desk, and it's the kind of thing where, you know, if you're just having a casual conversation and you're setting up your camera and you're having conversation, it is what it is. It's your background. But if you're representing an organization and you're trying to, you know, you're trying to make points that you want your audience to take seriously and understand. I mean, it's worth taking into consideration what the environment you're in says about you, and you know, the efforts that you're making to produce this content. And in this case, it comes off a little bit. It's messy, right? It comes off as if he didn't take a lot of time to prepare for this.
He doesn't look like he cares very much, does he? And and that's fine if he wants to represent himself that way, but it's hard to take him seriously. Well, or something, but you think that's bad. Look at this. Comments, Eric?
It's much of the same thing, perhaps a little bit more dangerous in places, right? It looks like those books up on the right have a chance falling down. But it's the same idea, right? It's just a matter of, you know, conducting yourself, or representing yourself and your organization well. And in this case, it's, you know, it doesn't quite do that. It misses the mark a bit.
And I think Jack in the chat earlier mentioned this is an easy fix. You could put the blur function on the back of on Zoom. And if you don't know how to do that, please ask somebody, unless I guess you're trying to make a point about your background, but you can blur that. And so it would cover a lot of that.
If you are trying to make a point, though, I think there are more effective ways to do it. You can put more interesting and more, you know, important information up behind you. And I mean, whether it's your organization's logo, or, you know, just a URL or something that, you know, is just again a static background, or something a little bit more creative. It just came to mind that during CFI Long Island's webinar with Mark Reimers, he's a quantitative neuroscientist, he had a background made up with a number of, it was a really artistic portrayal of neurons, and it was just a really cool looking background that he used for his presentations. But it really served to, you know, create an environment. We knew he was there to talk about the evolution of the human brain and mind.
Yeah.
And I think it really it set up the scenario really well, and it fit the theme.
Yeah, absolutely. So, you know, if you've put a little thought into it, again, remember, if you are the speaker or you're representing the organization by being the host or the moderator for the event, and you're on screen, people aren't really going to be concentrating on what you have to say. There's an airplane. People aren't really going to be concentrating on what you have to say. and you're distracted by some of those backgrounds. I mean, there's no way he could have thrown a couple cats in that video in the back and we wouldn't have noticed. Okay, so let me show you a couple more and we're about done. So hopefully you guys got your stuff in the chat. So this one right here is when we were talking about. I'm not going to show you. I turned off the audio on it, but you can see this is Rob Palmer. He's been doing a series of interviews for Skeptical Inquirer, and he's done a really terrific job. He changes his background often. This is one of those virtual backgrounds. So if Rob were to move too much, it's going to make him look like he's blending into the background, and it's not going to be. It spoils the illusion. But he's practiced, and he's more about staying still and keeping within that definition. So he's been doing these, and he changes the background quite a bit depending on who he's interviewing. He interviewed Neil deGrasse Tyson. He's interviewed Penn Jillette, and you can see how nice that looks with that background in there. So if you don't have something really great, you could come up with something or a way of marketing your own organization like he has here, and you can come up with a nice thumbnail that you can use on here. If you can't, maybe somebody within your group would, but you can see how nice that looks. And even Kyle over here on the side, he's got some, you don't have to have a beautiful decorator come in, but at least something. It looks symmetrical, and it's neatish, and you could tell he's a podcaster. You can see all the panels over here on the side of what he's doing. It's a nice look. And I have one more for you. Let me get over to it. This is a different screen. And this is something that I recorded recently, also off a YouTube video. And these are two women who look, they're side by side, and they're having a conversation with each other like you and I are right now. And you can see the difference. Here on the right, it's a very dull background. There's not much happening. There's a picture frame that looks like it's side, it's probably perfectly straight on the wall, but it looks like it's falling over or something, and it doesn't look quite straight. It's just, if you're going to be doing talks, or you're going to be organizing events, and you're going to be doing much more virtual things, make yourself a little corner, where you can have something visual that looks nice. Go online and look at what other people are doing, or come up with those virtual backgrounds, or blur the background or something so that you have something more visual. But these two is in a contrast. You see the Harvard lawyer Lee on the left. I mean, it looks lawyerly, I guess. You've got these Reader's Digests or whatever is in there. And, she could have more personality, or maybe that is exactly her personality right there. At least it's something visual. She's created a space, and it gives you the feeling that there's something more there. And, this is, I really wanted to include all this in our webinar today, because I think it's really important that we have these kind of conversations, that we're representing ourselves and are representing our organizations too.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, these are all just sort of the basics, the things that we really want our group leaders to take into consideration when they're preparing for these types of events. Because it's really easy to just, kind of skip over and say, I got a lot going on to even, set up this event with a speaker, and to, prepare to try to gather an audience. But if you're going to go through all of that effort, and you're going to try to create virtual content from that in-person event, it really is worth your time to go through this sort of checklist, and to make sure that you're preparing yourself for things to go wrong, and to kind of make sure that you're creating this type of content that is worth broadcasting. And yeah, I mean, I think, like we said at the outset here, this really is just us opening up a space for conversation here. I think we have the opportunity to create more in-depth webinars moving forward based on some of what we've talked about here today. So we're really looking forward to engaging with everyone at a deeper level after this webinar, to see what sort of problems you may have come up against running your own events, and what might be holding you back from trying this. So please, again, feel free to reach out at outreach@centerforinquiry.org with any questions, and we'll set up more talks in the future.
Right. And I'm just going to add a couple of really small things really quick. Lighting when you're doing virtual events, obviously, you get these ring lights. I could take off my glasses and then I wouldn't have ring lights, but we've tried everything. But if you don't have lights on, look how dark this can look. See, I mean, it's just like a $10 light you can get at a lot of places. Look how dark that is. And you can change the temperatures on it. It's a very simple thing that can fix a lot of problems you have. Some people carry them in their luggage if they're going to be out traveling around and doing these kinds of events. They're very inexpensive. So, you know, I really want to thank everybody for showing up, and for all of those people who are watching this virtually. We really appreciate you guys' support. Eric and I have really just started doing these kinds of things. We've been talking about for several months that this is where we want to do, is trying to create content that will really help organizations to grow and to be better and find more organizers. We really need to find more people who are willing to step up and to help out the groups that are able to have different talents. You know, not everybody's comfortable being in front of a camera. Not everybody's able to do a talk. But, you know, we all have different kinds of skills, and sometimes there will be people within the group that we can rely on that will be able to help, you know, create thumbnails that are for the backgrounds, or to at least give feedback, or to handle the audio, or to handle the video later. What we're with this particular webinar that we're talking about, Eric and I had a lot of conversations about why we're doing this way, without really calling anybody out directly, except for the people that we did, you know, that were things I took off the internet and mistakes that I personally have made with our past skeptic camps. But really what we're trying to do is we want to make sure that we respect the organization that we are representing, by showing some respect for that organization and hoping to grow the community and put these things onto like a YouTube site or something like that, where people will want to watch them over and over again and feel with confidence that they're giving these out to their friends. Hey, check out this lecture. You know, you want to show some respect, not only for the channel and the people that you're representing, if you're hosting, or if you're the speaker, you want to represent yourself well. You know, if your point is that you want to show that you're disorganized, okay, well, that's your point, but you're representing yourself and people are not going to pay good attention to you. And as the organizers themselves, show some respect, not only for your speaker, by giving them the best opportunity to have the best lighting, the best sound, to be able to create the best content for them later, whenever they watch, you know, the content's on YouTube later, but also respect for the virtual audience that is there, that is watching this right now, not only on the webinar, the Zoom screen that we're on right now, but also for those people who are watching this later on YouTube. Break the fourth wall. Go ahead and break that wall. I mean, because that's where we are right now. And I don't see that we're going to be going back to just in-person events anytime soon. I think it's going to be I think we're going to do a lot more virtual, and the tools are going to get better over the years too. So it's important that you show respect not only for the work that you're creating, your organization, the virtual people who are watching, the channel that you represent, as well as the people who are in the audience that are watching as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
And keep in mind, not everything's going to go smoothly. There's always going to be some kind of falls, and think that through. Think about what could happen and how you might be able to deal with that. But really, you guys just try a little bit to think this over before you have these events, and what your goal is. Which is, what is our goal, people? Our goal is to treat your virtual audiences well, and to create content that is worth watching. Thank you so much, Eric.
Oh, thank you, Susan. And thank you everyone who came tonight, and everyone who's watching later on YouTube. We appreciate you all.
Leave your comments and don't forget to email us, and we're going to be doing more of these. And if you guys have better suggestions, please send them to outreach@centerforinquiry.org. Or if you're one of these people who probably we should be consulting because you have some expertise in this area, we'd like to hear from you too. So please get a hold of us at outreach@centerforinquiry.org.
Wonderful. Well, have a good night, everyone. Thank you.
Bye, everybody.